The virtual CISO moment is brought to you by vCISO Services, a leading provider of quality and experienced virtual chief information security officers for small and mid-sized businesses. Check them out at vcisoservices.com. Hi, I'm Greg Schaefer, and welcome to the virtual CISO moment. We've got Derek Morris with us today. He is a virtual chief information security officer with almost 3 decades in IT, InfoSec, cybersecurity, has a whole bunch of certifications, including the CISSP, the CISM, and more. His experience includes bankings and credit unions, and he is currently serving as a vCISO for Wolf & Company. Derek, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you for putting this on.
So you obviously have a lot of experience in cybersecurity and InfoSec just by virtue of all your certifications. And I should have also mentioned, too, that you got a bachelor's in computer information systems as well with a minor in applied statistics. So you've been doing this for a while. Why and how, maybe not in that order, did you get into cybersecurity? And can you take us through your journey from that decision point to where you're at today?
Yeah, it's a long traveled road, I guess. Coming out of college, I initially had a job as a developer for Lotus Notes,
Oh,
and
I remember Lotus Notes.
boy,
Yeah.
that
You're
was not
dating
my
yourself.
bag. That was not my bag. It was short term, and then 9/11 hit, and there were some changes at the organization I was at, and said if you want to stay employed, you can go over to the help desk. I said, you know what? I gotta do something. I gotta work. So help desk it was. And you learn a lot about different areas at the help desk, including how to deal with folks on the phone. um, so quickly through the help desk, bumped up, level one, level two, and then went on site at an organization down in Connecticut, and that's where I really got hands on. Started to learn building systems, configuring different systems, and touching networking and huge scale networks that were on site there. That just piqued my interest, and then it started certification time and going to get MCP and working towards MCSE. It was a long time ago. That started, and I moved on from there to a CPA firm that had an IT assurance arm, and that's where we started to do SAS 70s, and we started to get into the Mastercard and Visa world pre PCI. So that's when the security piece started happening. Started to meet
Sure.
some really
And
interesting people.
and for those folks who are not familiar with the term SAS 70, if I'm not mistaken, that was actually
Yeah.
the predecessor to what we call now the SOC 1, which we also have SOC 2s now for
Mhm.
InfoSec, but the SOC 1 is more on the financial services side.
Yeah, and it's how they get executed is very different nowadays from then. Traveling across the country and sitting in an office for a week with a pile of paper reviewing policies and procedures and talking with different folks. So that's how I met a lot of folks that were in the security world then. And this is early 2000s. Started to hear about CISSP and started to poke at that. Got the book and it was, that big, and said, all right, I'll give it a shot. It kind of, you know, life happened,
I got
married,
that big book
kids,
on
family.
the shelf right back there. I know
Oh,
the one
yeah.
the Common Body of Knowledge, I think, the
There you
blue
go. Yep.
or the
CBK.
green and the yellow and the gold one, the green and the gold one, yeah.
hmm So life happens, and we go on, and I move on from that firm and became an IT manager and then IT director,
Mhm.
building systems, configuring systems. But I always had a hand in keeping them secure. Some of the folks I met in my travels um, introduced me to certain tools that I would take in, open source tools, and build them up to help with the securing of the environment and giving good visibility to things. Um, so that happened, and I landed at a biotech company that was just a great 5 years. Had fantastic people there. The company was gobbled up by the big, big body that's in the biotech world in New England here, and that was the point where I said, "Time to go CISSP," and I went. I did it. I passed it, and I can pinpoint that day as it shifting my career path totally over to the infosec world and cyber world, getting that open doors so quickly. Went and started to do some more security assessing, then got into this building out these security programs with organizations and started a very informal type of vCISO service at the last organization I was at. And that was definitely my bag. I like doing that. That was fun. So an opportunity opened up at Wolf that led me to jump to them and actually build up the vCISO service there. We're a national firm. We're a very recognized name and thousands of clients that we can take advantage of to help build their cyber program up and just put the right tools in place. It's a many stops along the way, but a lot of good moves I've felt and have, you know, good success so far. Knock on wood, huh?
Yeah, I know that's a great path. It's funny how like a lot of us in cybersecurity, infosec, whichever term you want to use,
Mhm.
we kind of like almost fell into it, and then when we fell into it, we
Yeah.
realized we loved it. I didn't love it at first. I went kicking and screaming. I liked the networking side before,
Mhm.
and I realized I was spending more time blocking people from getting access at one point in time. But you mentioned the CISSP, and obviously that was a major accomplishment to do. I remember when I went through the whole process and took the test and all that. But I have to ask, because there are a lot of folks out there that are probably prepping for this, that are listening to this right now. What's a short bit of advice that you can give someone who's prepping for the CISSP, whether it be in the actual preparation or
Mhm.
the night before the test or actually taking the test?
Yeah, I found doing all these certification exams is getting your hands on that book and being really organized and structured and disciplined. Uh, understand what you got to go through and put yourself on a clock. Uh, some folks I've seen just book out the test and then study to that, so they force themselves to do that.
Hmm.
I, on the other hand, like to get victories. Let's get domain one done. Let's get domain two done. Let's understand it. Go through some practice tests, and then as you see the end coming closer, setting that time to take the test and just going for it. It's a nerve wracking bit that never gets easy. You just always get that angst about taking a test that you spent $500-600 for. So it's just a good way to structure yourself and make sure you're organized. That's a really big piece. Discipline stuff.
And there is so much angst. I like telling folks that the night before the test, you shouldn't really cram, because if you don't know it by then. But
Exactly.
to spend some time relaxing, do whatever you works for you. For me, this was
Mhm.
back in the day where you had to actually travel somewhere and do it by pencil as opposed to online. And
Mhm.
my relaxation involved several Sam Adams, which worked for
Oh
me, but
yeah.
I am not recommending that to other folks. But you need to relax. So you're with Wolf right now. Do I
Yep.
have that right?
That's
Wolf and
correct. Yep.
Company. Okay.
Yep.
And as a building out their and working on their virtual CISO uh, line of business, what's a typical client for Wolf?
It's going to be a small mid-sized organization, probably up to about 250 people down to 20, 30 folks that may be working at that organization. Um, we're big in the financial institution space, so those are easy for us to get involved with. We understand all the regulatory pieces to it. Um, we cross over to different niches as well. We call them niches. So healthcare. As a matter of fact, we have a professional sports team, some manufacturing, um, even a cannabis fintech we have. So it's a lot of different areas that we play in, because we found if you can do this with a financial institution, it's only easier to do it at a healthcare. They're at a different space, of course. But if you're doing it so structured in an FI space, doing it in healthcare, doing it in manufacturing is not a stretch. I think the other way around might be a little bit more difficult if you were coming from, say, healthcare or manufacturing, try to go into banking and understanding, holy smokes, there's so many areas we have to cover and different regulatory needs. It's very different. So I think that's the path we take.
I think banking might have gotten it right earlier before anybody
Mhm.
else, as far as taking the approach of determining the controls that you need to have in a security program based
Mhm.
on maturity. So they have as I'm sure you're familiar with, the cybersecurity assessment tool,
Mhm.
and which is relies upon not only here are the things you need to do for this particular maturity level, whether it be baseline, evolving, and then I always
Mhm.
forget the other three. But the thing that makes the cat, which is how a lot of
Hmm.
us refer to it, rather unique, or back in the day, was the fact that it it looks at the inherent risk of the organization, and not just inherent risk from a IT infosec control standpoint, but what are the things you're doing? How many wires do you have per
Yeah, it's funny.
per
Yeah.
month, or that sort of thing. So yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think that those who came from financial services and now are working with other organizations do have that advantage. And I say that as a former bank CISO myself. So,
Right. You understand it. Yep.
but you do have clients across different spectrums. So right now, here in the beginning of 2023, what
Mhm.
would you say is probably the predominant threat in information security for small and mid-sized businesses?
What we're seeing now, because we have such a visibility across different industries, we're seeing a lot of the end user threats become louder. We're seeing a lot more phishing attempts, and we're seeing a lot more ways to try to achieve that phishing attempt. So the end user training to me is really up at the top, constantly evolving. I mean, you're getting smishing attempts, and then you get the phishing attempts. Now you get this social media angle where somebody can fake out a Facebook user that you might be very familiar with, and they have that vector to try to get your attention and make you
Right.
do something. So we have all these different areas now, making everyone aware of this, not just in the business, but darn it, at home, right? You're going to take these things and do it at home and make sure you protect yourself and not, get swindled per se for concert tickets or, sporting event tickets, and they're not real. And in fact, wiring over money to somebody that isn't really there. So the end user one is a big one. And one other one I like to mention a lot is third party, fourth party, nth party degree uh, monitoring and awareness of what those those organizations are doing for you, and understanding what capabilities they have to inform you if an incident were to happen. Uh, Look at the news every day, right, Greg? It's something different every day. FanDuel had a breach for the service they had. There's another one. We obviously know Solar Winds had a down the supply chain issues. This third party, fourth party, nth party type of
Hmm.
problems that you have to get your arms around. And what can a CISO do to ensure that the risk is reduced to a level that it's acceptable, and how
And
they can
and and
communicate.
an organization doesn't, just
Mhm.
because that they're using a third party service provider for something, that doesn't mean that they're not responsible for the data
Correct.
if it gets breached, right?
Correct. Right. Yep. It
So
happens.
we talk about, and we mentioned the SAS 70 before, back many many moons ago, but one of the things that folks do is they do SOC 2 report reviews. But sometimes I'm thinking that maybe that's not quite enough. Do you have any insights as to what is a good way to look at the risk for a small mid-sized business from your third party service providers? The SOC 2, that's a good start, or
Yeah.
any sort of third party attestation. But do you have any suggestions beyond that?
So what we're seeing, a blended way to go about it. If you have a SOC 2, then we only want you to answer these 10, 20 questions. If
Hmm.
you do not, here's a big old 100 question um, Excel sheet to send out to them to understand their posture.
Or you can
Uh,
send them the full SIG, which is 1,500 questions.
1500 one, yeah, it's a monster.
That's if you
So
don't really want to do business with them anymore.
yeah,
It's
you
like,
want to not make friends, do that.
right. I've had to fill out many of those. It's painful, but
It's painful. Yeah. So starting with, obviously looking for those reports. You get a SOC 2 report. Uh, Hopefully it's a type 2. Type 1 is okay, but let's take it to the next level and see what a type 2 for its operating effectiveness, right?
mhm.
Any other pieces, if you have a PCI, if you have a ROC, some sort of way to get visibility into what they're doing and how they're going to communicate with you if something were to happen, what they're going to do with your data. Uh, if those are in place, then obviously there's a small subset we want to touch on, uh, but sticking to that and pushing with them. Sometimes it's going to take a face-to-face conversation to get this done, other than just kicking it over the fence and hoping for the best. Pushing it along is a challenge now. Some places think they're bigger than they are and don't have to answer these things. I gave you my SOC 2, that's enough. So it's a back and forth that has to be done to dance.
So, and how can the virtual CISO help in that regard? And where I'm coming from is um, for the most part, I'm not going to say across the
Mhm.
board, but for the most part, your C-suite for small and mid-sized businesses, the only reason why they want to read a SOC 2 is if they have insomnia. I mean, they read this thing and it's a
Get the
very
eye
hard
drops.
read. Yeah, exactly. And it's a very hard read that it's hard for them to digest. Can the virtual CISO kind of help translate what's in the SOC 2 and the other aspects of the program so that the business leaders understand?
Yeah, you just nailed it, Greg. So the team I've built, we have IT backgrounds.
Hmm.
So when you working with a client like that, having an IT understanding and having IT empathy, we call it, is the right way to get the info out of that and translate it appropriately. There is a lot of technical writing in that SOC 2 report. So being able to digest that quickly and understand that this network, it looks right, they're doing the right things with these services and covering where they have to, and seeing the sort of controls that they'll have to ensure they're secure, then taking that and doing that translation, letting them know that there's a risk here or not, is hard. I think that comes with time and seasoning and gray hair and different stops along the way and meeting with different folks at different levels to understand how you can communicate with them. You can't just go acronym crazy in an IT way to them. They're not going to get it. You have to make sure it's helping out from a business perspective too. Otherwise, what's the point?
I may or may not be guilty of not to clients, but of inventing IT acronyms every now and then. Particularly like if you're dealing with like a vendor who's trying to sell you something and you just throw up an acronym that you just make it.
Yeah.
I think we're working on that. I think that'll be third quarter. It's like
Little buzzword, little
little buzzword. Well, you said something there that I love this, and if you could explain it a little bit more, IT empathy.
Mhm.
What does how would you define that?
So you have an IT background, Greg. You remember those long
Absolutely.
nights configuring, building, things go down, people are yelling
And
oh
getting
boy,
paged and all that. Yeah,
paged.
thank you for. I spent years in therapy trying to subdue that. Thank
It's
you.
those all those wounds build up that empathy for that IT world. So now take it to where we are now as a CISO, and you tell an IT group that, hey, we have to reconfigure something to make it more secure, to harden it. We have that background now to say, here's what's going to happen. Here's what could happen. You're going to go down. People are going to cry and moan and do everything. But here's what we can do. We understand the impact. Here's how we can do it in a nice, controlled way and have a way to go back. Not a lot of folks have that. It's tend to be just throw it over. Hey, reconfigure that so it's hardened, and that's where the conversation ends. How are you going to make friends with IT that way? Having that empathy to understand what the heck they're going to go through when you say you need to make this change to secure the environment better is it goes light years. Then you start to get into good conversations. They open up to you, and the working relationship just takes off from there. They buy into your security thinking because you can speak to them in the right way. So it's a really, really kind of neat thing I heard it one other time in some other conversation and it stuck with me. And I just
Mhm.
wanted to keep it front and center to the service that we deliver to.
I think that's spot on. And
Mhm.
all joking aside, I mean, I did remember sometimes in my past where, yeah, we had those hard nights and all that, but it also speaks to the qualities of what makes a good virtual CISO.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, we do see in our industry that there are some services that offer the virtual CISO that's maybe not um, quite as beneficial to the business as maybe someone who has, to use your word, IT empathy
Mhm.
or other aspects. So I've always said that I think that it's vitally important that a small and mid-sized business properly vet their virtual CISO
Mhm.
service. what are a couple of things that they can do to ensure that they're getting a virtual CISO that can actually help them in the IT risk management space, as opposed to maybe someone who, as one former guest said, who was part of an MSP, that basically they were being used as an insider salesperson to recommend products that the MSP could sell them. I mean, that's horrible, but it does happen.
Hmm. Yeah, I think looking for someone with a well-rounded uh, background and service delivery um, experience, not just one niche that you're in or industry you're in. What other ones do you have that can complement that? And
Mhm.
then understanding too, if you're going with an organization, is there material out there that they're maybe writing about, speaking about, talking together in a network like you and I, Greg? Um, i- Looking around like that, there's a lot of easy Google searches for vCISO, and you get organizations across the country that maybe just spun up. I mean, there's no depth there. It's not like this service has been around for a long time, but it's been around enough to to stretch its legs and understand who's doing this well and who's not.
I saw it on LinkedIn, and I wish I could remember who posted it. I saw it shortly before starting the recording for this podcast, but they had an interesting take on the virtual CISO world, which I tend to agree with, and I probably will respond to that post at some point in time today. That actually the virtual CISO is going to expand in growth because it's going to become more like the take here was that it's going to become more like a legal services. A lot of times you see
Oh, I did
firms
see
that
that too. Yes,
you're
yes,
talking, the post I'm talking about,
yes,
and
yes, yes.
I think that's a very interesting take where and if we get to that point, that's going to weed out some of the
Yeah.
folks that have come up over the last 3 or 4 years that are offering it more from a money generating perspective
Mhm.
as opposed to a service perspective. So,
Yeah.
well, I'm glad somebody else saw it, because it's like, I'm like,
Yeah, I did.
no, I'm not making this up. So, well, all of this stuff, you talk about IT empathy, you talk
Mhm,
about the challenges with being a virtual CISO and all that. Certainly, there's a lot of stress involved with being in cybersecurity in general, and I think probably maybe even more so in some ways being a virtual CISO.
mhm.
What's one thing that you do to help decompress from the stress, so to speak?
Uh, Drink.
So did you have like some Sam Adams before you took the
I went.
CISSP?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. The night before, absolutely. Yeah. The ways I deal with it. I really like security, so I tend to research on the side, read articles. What are people putting out there, and
Mhm.
understand that, and participate in that networking piece too. Is fun to meet people that are in it and have their own perspectives and what we can share together. I really like that stuff. So it keeps you on your toes. Because
Oh,
darn
then
it, Greg, every day is something new in what happened. Oh, a breach here, something went down for Delta. It's like, wow, okay, what are we gonna do here? What's happening? And getting to the bottom of it is kind
and
of fun.
and you said networking, which is so critical, I think, and of course not data networking, but which is
No, no,
cool too.
yeah, yeah,
But
yep,
just having a good network of peers that you can bounce ideas off of, or that's
yeah.
where I get a lot of my insight and intel. We just talked about that one post on LinkedIn.
Mhm,
It's like you can't do this job effectively in a vacuum. Now, I think that maybe some of the, I don't want to say lower level, but some of the cyber analysts where you're specifically focused on like a penetration test against a particular system. Well, that's
mhm.
okay. It's like you're kind of like a one hit wonder there, so to speak. But when you get into the holistic information security management that CISOs and virtual CISOs do, you need to have that input from your network without a doubt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, and sometimes networking can involve like a couple of drinks every now and then. so,
Absolutely.
so what are your future plans?
My future plans is to grow this service at Wolf and continue to make it better, build a strong team. The talent is out there. It just needs to be gathered in the right way. So I feel
Mhm.
growing this over the next few years is just going to be excellent experience. Looking to branch out to many areas as we can is obviously a good thing for the business, but what we'll get to experience and see and then share will create, a real type of trend, real problems and challenges that organizations face that we can share and go back to that networking group and say, listen, this is what real problems are for these small to mid-sized businesses. We see it because we get to see all the dirty laundry and the skeletons in the closets. We get to see all the challenges and problems that are there and what we can do to help them. So we get to generate real data. That's for sure.
Very good. So the website, if I have it right, is Wolf and Co, wolfandco.com, right?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. And so if you're looking for a virtual CISO, and particularly if you're in the financial services space, but certainly that's not a limitation, check them out. Derek, thank you so much for joining us today. I know we've had, didn't really mention it, but we've had a couple of challenges trying to schedule this, but appreciate your flexibility and coming on today.
Thank you, Greg. I really appreciate it.
And everybody, stay secure.